So we'll start with the approval of the September 8th agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, Chris makes a motion. and
Second.
Karen, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Ready, and then we need the approval of the June 2nd minutes. Does
Jerry,
anyone
there
find
is-
anything?
Yeah, there's one minor correction, but it's gonna be fixed, so it's on the attendance list, and she's right now stepped away from the screen. Note that Deborah Wright's attendance name is Greif, and Andrew, please, no jokes at this moment. Let's just move on. I'm just trying to make it very clear that it's been fixed, so I'd like to make a motion with that little correction to be approved.
Well, let's wait, just be sure Andrew didn't find anything.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion. All right, so Chris made a motion.
Wait a minute,
We had
this is a red letter day, that he didn't find anything to
We had
correct.
a second from somewhere.
Second, I'll second it,
All right, so
especially since Andrew didn't have anything to correct.
all righty, so we're good on that? All righty, so then we move down to the chair's reports. So I'll start, we have a packed agenda, so I'm gonna try and keep it brief. Yesterday, Governor Hochul announced that masks are now optional on transit. PCAC issued a statement saying the governor's mask optional announcement is welcome and restores a sense of normalcy as we get back on trains and buses to return to work and school. And some of us may still choose to wear a mask to protect ourselves, that's okay, so that they do not disappear so they might not disappear entirely. But there's one less contentious rules of the rails that need to be enforced when there are so many that are critical to rider safety. PCAC staff recently organized a press conference in support of congestion pricing and got good participation from our elected officials, including the Manhattan Borough President, and excellent press coverage. As most of you are aware, the virtual public hearings on congestion pricing have been very well attended, with many varying opinions, both pro and con being offered. Our executive director, Lisa Daglian, is working diligently with MTA Human Resources to fill our open staff positions, and we hope to start the interview process for our next associate director within the next couple of weeks. At the Long Island Railroad, all of the mega projects, third track, East Side Access, and the Penn Station renovation, appear to be continuing on schedule. Lisa and I attended the press conference held to celebrate the opening of the first section of third track at New Hyde Park. And while we were unable to attend due to short notice, Governor Hochul and Janelle Lieber held a press conference this past Tuesday to provide an update on the Penn Station renovation. And basically, that update was to show the areas that they were able to open with the 16-foot high ceilings, which does make a really big difference. And regarding the third track, just so everyone knows, the second section of third track is open. There's just one section left to go on that, and that should be within the next month or so. The Long Island Railroad continues to push for formal policy regarding the use of mechanized scooters, et cetera, on our trains and train platform stations. In response, it appears that the Long Island Railroad will be rolling out public service announcements advising our riders not to be riding these devices on our platforms or within our stations. And on a personal note, while I'm fairly familiar with commuter rail, I've taken tours of the Bus Command Center in Brooklyn with Randy and Andrew, and the Subway Command Center, along with members of the Transit Riders Council, get a better understanding of how our buses and subways operate. And in addition, the Long Island Railroad Commuter Council took a field trip to the Long Island Railroad Movement Bureau in Jamaica in lieu of our August meeting. And that concludes my remarks. Are there any questions or?
Jerry?
Chris? Yeah.
Just one thing, just to let you know, on the Long Island Railroad 88 on site, that we did see them testing a test train when I was at Mineola. So they've been doing a lot of testing on that new track, and they've been testing it even going all the way up to Carlton. So they're still saying they have to work on the switching. But the second thing is just yesterday they did the Long Island Railroad Care on YouTube channel.
Okay.
So I do want to say that's a great thing to see, because then it's showing they're available at Jamaica, Penn, and Atlantic Terminal, and soon Grand Central. So I just wanted to add that in.
Okay, great. Anyone else?
Yeah, Jerry, Stu Goldstein here. I wanted to just mention that at the Rail Control Center, the tour was very impressive about the upgrades that they plan and how they are going to reorganize certain segments and modernize the board. But we did see an old issue that they still haven't tackled, and I want to make sure that it's on the record that, again, if there is an issue that disrupts the subway system, there still needs to be better interaction with the surface transit operation. They still don't have anybody from the bus network embedded at the control center and vice versa. So again, we have to plan and be resilient. And it was an old issue, but it still hasn't been tackled.
Okay, that's something for us to keep an eye on.
But Stu, but Stu should add on a positive note that they do have now embedded police, fire, and any other essential services embedded right there. And
Absolutely,
I
absolutely.
just
Yeah.
positive note also.
Okay. Well, it's always good to end on a positive note. All right, thank you.
I
Judy.
try.
All
And I
righty.
just want to say that, Jerry, that we always,
Randy.
when I worked there, we always had direct communication with the EMS, 911, the fire department, and the police. We always had that. This is just the personnel being there, but we always had that. And that goes
Well,
back
they have-
before I got there in the 80s.
But they have it again, and that's the good thing, that it's there now.
Let's just say it's new and improved.
New and improved,
New and
yes.
improved. Again,
Look at that.
positive-
Like the rest of
on
us,
a positive note.
like the rest of us.
All right, anybody else? Okay, I'll turn it over to Andrew. Andrew, you want to give your report?
Sure. So on transit, ridership had plateaued for a great many months at the 60 to 61% level of ridership. Labor Day was particularly high, and the days since Labor Day have also been high. Today, school begins again, and that will probably mean even higher ridership on the system.
Well,
There seems to be a tracking upwards, which is great news and what's something we all want to see. Weekends have already been very high, so for discretionary travel, people are choosing the transit system. Saturdays and Sundays, the trains are often standing room only. Now, it's true, some lines, because of the massive amount of work that's being done on weekends, does have lesser service on weekends. That's something that President Davey has said he will address. He understands ridership on weekends is high and that's when a lot of the GOs are taking place. So he will try to get higher levels of service on many lines or move certain aspects of the work that's being done to the overnight aspect. But President Davey is a big fan of getting as much work done on a particular GO that he can, which is why the concourse line is undergoing the renovations and the reconstruction that it is undergoing now. So hopefully we will continue to see higher ridership figures. That would be wonderful. The end of September or sometime in October, we're expecting the return of Z-Train service. The construction of the lower level of Parsons Archer and Suckman Archer, which has been happening all summer, should be over by then. And then the J-Trains will resume service all the way to Jamaica Center, and the Z-Trains will resume their directional service during the day. So that's something to look forward to. Needless to say, with this long amount of home games the Mets have had and the U.S. Open taking place in Flushing Meadows, the 7 line and the Long Island Railroad Port Washington branch have undergone tremendous ridership to these huge events. This once again highlights the need to make Mets Willets Point on both number 7 and the Long Island Railroad accessible. It's unbelievable that a big center of tourists and New Yorkers and regular visitors wouldn't be accessible. So we will continue to keep hammering that message home. But it was great to see really crowded 7 trains and Long Island trains, and everybody realizes transit is the best way to get to these events.
And
Yes.
at the rally that we held in support of congestion pricing, Assemblyman Robert Carroll was there, who is also a fellow major Met. And I spoke to him about the importance of making Met Point accessible. In fact, we used that as one of the congestion pricing funds could be used for that. And he actually committed to working with us on that. And Ray said that perhaps he had some contacts with the Met that he could share with us too, so,
We got to do this. It's long past time.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
it's,
Yeah, actually, it was an issue when Shea Stadium was built.
Oh, yeah.
Way back when, because that's, for those of you who don't know, that was a long time ago, 1964. And I was working at the World's Fair at the time. And that became an issue also for the World's Fair. So what is that, 50-something years or?
Yeah.
No, close to
Just
60 years.
60.
Oh, my God.
I had spoken with, John McCarthy about that, as well, after the third track event. He said that there's some, railroad funding available, that's what they, the leftover money from, that was recouped from the.
Yeah, they mentioned they were under budget, so we
Right,
kinda-
and under budget, that money's been put back into another project.
An awful lot of money was
Independent
put into making Main Street accessible.
Right,
Just one stop away, let's do it here, too.
right, so,
Andrew, may I also?
hold on, Judy.
Sorry.
They also, so we said, but that's not the transit side,
Yeah.
that's the Long Island Railroad side, so now we have to make that happen, and Steve Cohen and the US Open folks can, I'm certain, work with us.
Well, that was what I was going to, way back in the day, again, the Mets were owned by a woman who they didn't allow into the locker room, but that's another whole story, Joan Payson. And then the Mets were owned by various people, but Steve Cohen, who has more money than God, and is spending a lot of it, which is why the Mets are in first place now, thank goodness. But anyway, Andrew, is there any way that you, the board, or maybe even we can be in direct touch with Steve Cohen
So I'm working on it.
and talk to him about it? You know, I know somebody who knows him, so if I can help it, or
Figure out how we can do that
if I can
together.
help, yeah, but.
That would be really good.
Yeah,
Well,
because.
eliminate it for the cost of the utility infielder, really, I mean, you know.
We're not giving away
We won't get charged.
utility infielders right
Won't
now.
get charged again.
Come on, no, I think he has enough for a utility, he has enough for not even a utility info, but a good pitcher also, so.
Not giving up any pitchers either, right?
No, I said, he has enough for both.
Chris is trying to get
There's
our
one thing I'm gonna add in, because, you know, the community, but remember, Edith was also going nuts about this too, because Edith was, and as well as me, because when I was a kid, my grandmother couldn't even get onto the 7 train unless you're on those ramps, and then you gotta pray to God there's a staff person open that gate, because you gotta take the 7 to Flushing and to come back. That is like, you know, telling someone that, guys, this should have been accessible now. It should have been accessible in the past. So,
Oh, yeah.
so what I'm saying is, and I agree with everyone in here, that we need to make that truly ADA accessible.
Yep.
You have some areas that has ramps, let's combine it a little bit, and with a little bit, maybe an elevator and a ramp, could make it truly 1,000 times accessibility.
Sounds like
It might
a
even make the
project.
Yankees look bad, but guess what? It will make give people a chance to go
No
to
care.
both stadiums.
Look bad.
My son, Jeff LeBeau, works for the Mets. He's in charge of player development, which includes scouting and minor leagues and promotions and arbitration and all that sort of stuff. And so if we can be of any help to you, please let me know, because he attends all the major administration meetings at the Mets whenever they are deciding anything. So if I can help, let me know.
Thank you, Mark.
Great, Mark,
Thanks,
please,
Mark. Greatly
I'm
appreciated.
gonna put my email in the chat, if you could please send me a note, that would be wonderful.
Mark, will he be able to help us get tickets for the World Series?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Of course,
Thank
he
you.
does, he does drive there and park in the Mets parking lot, but I take the Lexington Avenue to the 7 and get there before he does every time. And I pay my fare.
Good to know. Okay, that concludes your report, Andrew?
Yes.
All right, anybody have any questions for Andrew, or
Why don't you put in your thing about.
hearing none? Randy, did you have anything you wanted to say about Metro North?
Well, yeah, ridership is up. I was looking earlier today, 5 hours earlier where I am, and they had a couple of 100% days over the weekend on the railroads, which is really good. But of course, it was a holiday weekend. We had a very nice tour courtesy of Metro North staff and Eastside Access staff, which I included in my minutes, and we dusted them up, fixed them up a little bit for what I needed. And otherwise, I don't have any. If anybody has any questions on them, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions for Andrew?
Okay. So,
Sharon?
Are we talking to Laz Parking, whatever it is, about making it possible while they have the track work from September to November for us to park farther south with our passes?
that's a great idea. We did this. They did this once before. Lisa, could you get a hold of May and make sure they do this?
Yes, I'll follow, yep.
That's
Thank
the
you,
least
Sharon.
they can do. Absolutely. Yes. Thanks for the suggestion. And once it's approved, let's make sure that Metro North sends the alerts out to everybody that they can do it.
Hey, anybody else have any questions for Randy? Hey, I think we're good.
Jeremy's here, actually, if we wanna.
Jeremy, are you prepared to go?
No, I think I'm going at 12:30 sharp.
It's a new time record, 10 minutes early?
Woo-hoo. Well, I'll just go with 10 minutes more to ask you questions. You can come right up here if
Why
you
don't
want.
you come, the
You wanna go-
camera's up here, so that would be great, and we can have a water bottle there for you.
Mine might not work.
Do you want to say anything?
Sure, we're, very pleased to have, Jeremy Feigelson with us. I'm gonna mess with your title, special counsel.
That's
Who is, chairing the payment evasion task force. It's not just theirs, it's also looking at payment of evasion on bridges and tunnels, which is particularly important as we enter the congestion pricing, zone, as it were. We are, I'm a member of the task force, very active. So it's, we've spoken about having a gathering of PCAC members to talk. I've been with Jeremy, at a different time, but I wanted, Jeremy and I spoke about him coming to give, an overview of the work of the group and to, get some initial thoughts.
Well, thanks, Lisa, for the invitation. Thanks, everybody, for the chance to be with you. As Lisa said, I'm Jeremy Feigelson. I'm special counsel at the NTA. I joined the agency in March from private law practice. I have a long career of local government as sort of my night job, and now it's my day job, and I'm thrilled to be here. The panel, we're passing around two documents. One is just a photo array that shows the panel membership, Lisa, and the 15 other outside civic leaders who've joined the panel. You'll see we have folks from a wide variety of backgrounds: social justice, law enforcement, academia, nonprofit, for-profit. It's a group that's diverse in every way: professional, personal backgrounds, demographics, mindsets, and approaches. So we're very excited with the group that volunteered to serve. And thank Lisa in particular for being a member of the panel. One fine point of correction: our panel co-chairs are Roger Maldonado and Rose Pierre Louis, who you'll see in the photo array. I'm acting as sort of in the staff function, not as a member of the panel or as chair. And we also have folks from the Partnership for New York City who are helping on the staff front. So we're very pleased with that partnership. What I'd like to do is just kind of give you the who, why, what, where, and when of the panel, and I'm happy to take any questions. I'll just say at the outset, the panel is going through a process, a fact-finding and deliberation process, and I want to be respectful of that. So just headline news, I'm not in position to talk about panel recommendations, because at this point, those recommendations haven't been baked. And so I'm not going to get out ahead of our panelists on that, but I'm very happy to talk about issues and process. So the who, as I said, it's Roger, Rose, Lisa, and the 13 other members of the panel. I just want to underscore that we really sought in asking local leaders to serve on the panel. We sought to draw from a lot of different sources, different backgrounds. David Jones is a member of the panel, well known to all of you, I'm sure, a member of the MTA board, head of the Community Service Society, and one of the leading advocates on the issue of fair evasion enforcement over the years. We also have a former criminal court judge, Michael Sonberg. We have a couple of former federal and local prosecutors on the panel. So a real range of backgrounds and viewpoints. Rick Ostrander is the head technology lawyer at BlackRock. The panel has a strong technology focus, so we're very glad to have Rick as a member. Rose is the head of the McSilver Institute on Poverty Policy at NYU. Roger is the former chair of the New York City Bar Association and a senior partner at a leading law firm here in the city. So it's a great group, and I will say a very independent-minded group. It's a pleasure to work with them, and they're very, very engaged with the process. So in the partnership, Natalia Quintero, who you may know, Natalia ran the Transit Tech Lab for many years, and was a senior leader at the partnership in New York City. Natalia was originally my co-director, staff level for the panel, and a member of the panel. She had to give up the staff hat because she just changed jobs. She's left the partnership and joined Silicon Valley Bank, gone back to prior career that she had in finance. She remains on as a member of the panel and a valued colleague in this project. So really just an amazing group of New Yorkers, and we think we're lucky to have them. So that's the who, a little bit about the who. The why, one of the documents we passed out is the speech that Chairman Lieber gave back in April when he announced that we were standing up this independent panel. It really is a very good roadmap for the issue. Given who you all are and your focus on NPA, I think you know this, but I mean the numbers on this are really bad. We published them. We're on track to lose about $550 million this year. That's across every mode of the system. That's subway, that's bus, that's commuter rail, that's bridge and tunnel. In terms of the dollar impacts, in order, subway is the biggest source of loss, bus is second. Bridge and tunnel is third, about $50 million, and commuter rail we estimated at 0.5. That math in the face of structural deficits that exceed $2 billion a year going forward in the out years when the federal money runs out, it's just not a sustainable situation fiscally. And there's a strong social element to this too. We hear all the time from our paying riders, from the paying public, how frustrated they are with the non-paying public, and they want more done about this. And we hear that, and we're trying through this panel to be responsive to it. So that's a little bit about the why. I'm happy to go into any of those numbers. We have different methods by mode of MTA, of how those figures are calculated. A mix of estimation and hard count. Happy to go into to any of that if that's of interest. But the headline there is that those numbers are bad, and they have gotten significantly worse over the recent years. So the what Janet talked about in her speech back in April was defining this as sort of an all of the above problem that requires all of the above solutions. So what do we mean by that? I think historically, when people hear fare evasion, there's been a sort of an instant connection in some minds. Okay, you must be talking about subways, and you must be talking about the jumping of the turnstile. And the problem is actually much bigger and broader than that. Certainly, the jumping of the turnstile in the subway is a significant issue. It's a significant piece of the problem. But even within the subways, people evade in lots of different ways. Subway emergency gate, Jana has talked about as the superhighway to fare evasion, and that's absolutely true. It is actually the single biggest source of unpaid entry into the subways by a healthy measure. Just as an example, what do we mean when we call this an all-of-the-above problem? One of the things the panel is doing is looking at this from an engineering perspective. What can be done to secure those gates in a way that is consistent with the fire code, that's consistent with our accessibility obligations, but that just ensures that gate stays closed more often. The more that gate is closed, the less fare evasion we're going to see. One of the things the panel's been talking about is the difference between the evader of opportunity and the intentional evader. This is a well-known distinction. We're not breaking new ground here. It's been studied. There's academic work on this, and it's common sense. There are some people who evade with a MetroCard in their pocket or an Omni media in their pocket. They could pay. They may have entered the station intending to pay, but hey, the gate was open, and so today I'll take a free ride. And then there's the person who's determined to evade no matter what the circumstance. So got to approach the solutions with that distinction in mind. So the more the gate stays closed, we think, the less opportunistic evasion we're going to see. We've talked about this in terms of what we call the 4 E's. The panel has broken its work into 4 work streams, and each one starts with an E. The issues about the physical situation, the subway, bus, bridge tunnel, commuter rail, we call that the environment work stream. That's physical setup. It's also technology, and what we can do, particularly as we move into an all-omni system. What opportunities does that create? For us to use technology to mitigate evasion. I'll just mention as an example, I don't know how many select bus service riders we have in the room here. Okay. Anybody ever been checked by our Eagle team on the select bus? Okay.
I have.
I see some hands. Great. Okay.
In a good way.
Nearly as often as I used to.
Okay. Well, they're out there. I got checked the other day myself. I can vouch that it's current, and I didn't stage it. They happened to walk onto my bus.
Oh, no, I like when they do
They're
it.
much nicer now than when they check people than when it first started. When it first started, there were really very serious problems with the Eagle team because they were just yanking people, and they were, at least people kept on telling me their stories, and especially on the buses on the east side. And I saw it happening myself. Now, but I want to say, that was when it first started. They have improved, and they are really nice and polite, and much better than they were then. So
I'm glad
something that we can cite improvement.
I'm glad to hear you see the improvement. I've been out with the Eagle team a bunch of times lately. Sometimes they know I'm there, sometimes they don't. My impression is that they're extremely professional, extremely courteous, and they do a great job, including when riders respond in a hostile or aggressive way to the fare enforcement. I mentioned the Eagle team under this heading of the environment work stream because if you're on a select bus, you'll see our Eagle team members carrying an optical reader, which they can actually use to electronically scan an Omni device to see if the rider is paid. So that's just an example of how technology and fare enforcement can help one another. And we're looking at possible ways that or similar technologies can be expanded. So that's one E. Three others. One is education, and by that we mean public messaging. I'm sure you've seen lots of efforts by the MTA over the years to, through digital signboards, physical signage in our buses and subways to encourage fare payment. Obviously, with the numbers that we're seeing, there's a sense that, hey, maybe we should go back to the drawing board and find some new approaches to messaging. So that's underway, and the panel is strongly supportive of that. Also, under the education mode, there's obviously a significant issue with student usage of the transit system. We love it. It's the first day of school. It's great to see the kids out there. It's great to know they're carrying student Metro cards. We want to, build a culture of fare payment or rebuild a culture of fare payment, and that starts with the next generation. So Chancellor Banks is a member of the panel. He's very engaged with us, very excited about these issues. He pulled together for the panel a focus group of high school students recently. We had the chance to sit for 90 minutes with a bunch of kids from all 5 boroughs and to hear their experience with the transit system and their ideas about fare payment and fare evasion. It was incredibly interesting and helpful, and you came away from that meeting just feeling really good if these kids are the next generation of New York City leaders. So that leaves 2 E's. One is equity, and we are taking a close look at the available subsidy programs, meaning an intense focus in particular on fair fares. I'm sure people are generally familiar with it, but just a quick refresh. This is the program administered by the city, not by us, which provides a 50% subsidy to people who are at or below the federal poverty level. So it's a federal definition, a 50-state definition of what it means to be poor, and the enrollment in that program, has been below what anybody wishes it would be. There's a range of estimates here. We know that something on the order of 300,000 people are enrolled. It's not 100% clear what the number of eligible people is, but let's say roughly that only about a third of people who could get a fair fares card have one. And then there's issues with uptake and usage even for people who have the card. The usage is not what you'd hope to see. So the panel is looking very closely at how that program might be made bigger and better, how it might be made more accessible and better known, and whether there are opportunities to consider providing similar kinds of support across other modes of the MTA system. So all of that is underway, and Jana was very pointed in the speech back in April. You have the text in front of you about his own frustration that they're sort of bigger, better known, and more widely enrolled in, and more heavily used by the people who are enrolled. We are in a very close partnership with HRA on this. HRA has come to a panel meeting, and we are working with them at the staff level just to document all these issues around fair fares and to come up with some solutions that work for all the stakeholders. So that's the equity piece. And then the fourth E is enforcement. And obviously, that has been, a big part of the public discussion around fare evasion. I hope it's clear by the fact that, I'm putting enforcement, at the back of the queue of the four E's here, that, we see it as, one part of the solution, but you're going to see commentary and I think recommendations from the panel across all four E's. It's an all of the above situation that requires all of the above responses. Here, I just want to first emphasize, because we're talking about all modes of the system, we're talking about a lot of different enforcement agencies. NYPD has responsibility for evasion underground, so they do the subway patrols. Bus evasion is enforced primarily by the MTA Eagle teams. There's some enforcement effort also from MTA PD. Commuter rail fare enforcement sort of begins with the conductors, but when we're talking about actual enforcement, someone being summoned, then the MTA PD comes into play. And at bridges and tunnels, we have our bridge and tunnel officer corps, about 400 officers that patrol our 9 tolled crossings, and they're responsible for the situations where somebody has obscured a license plate or forged a license plate and tries to avoid the toll by doing that. So we're talking with all of the stakeholders, all of those different agencies. We are looking at data. We are talking to district attorneys. We are talking to advocates and legal aid folks. We're trying to get all perspectives, trying to understand the data critically, just what is currently happening. I just want to highlight, I'm sure a lot of you saw the article in the Daily News a couple of days ago, and Andrew, you were front and center and quoted in that article. I hope people also saw the updated version. Daily News corrected its initial statement of the level of fare evasion enforcement. Originally published that the NYPD had summoned, I think they said about 6,000 or 7,000 people this year, and the number's actually north of 40,000. So they've corrected that. And I would just point also to the NYPD data that's published on nyc.gov. By local law, NYPD has to release a great deal of data about fare evasion enforcement, and the panel's pulling down that data and has looked at it as well. The goal here really is to make fresh, innovative suggestions, and the panel has been trying to actually put eyes on the problem and going out in the field, and out with Lisa on Metro North, and we've taken panelists out to see the buses and the subways, and just to stand there and observe and watch evasion and evasion enforcement in a focused way has been a great learning experience. I think very eye-opening for the panel. So a lot of fact-finding, a lot of benchmarking. The panel is very interested in seeing how other transit systems are handling this, and one thing I can report on that is that every transit system across the country, and indeed the world, is really struggling with this issue. Fare evasion seems to have spiked everywhere. There may be a pandemic aspect to that, but when we talk to peer systems, and we talked to one just this morning, everybody is really wrestling hard with this problem. And I wouldn't say that we've come across one transit system that sort of cracked the case yet, but we are picking up lots of good ideas by direct contact with peer systems. We're looking at APTA, which has published a major report on fare evasion across American transit systems. Comet is doing work across international systems, and we're in touch with them as well. So that's another important source of information for the panel. So the where, we're having a series of meetings. We've got one more full panel meeting coming up in October. It's the field visits, and the when, we're looking towards the end of the year. Certainly within 2022, you're going to see a report to the public with fact-finding and with, we think, some really fresh and interesting recommendations across all 4 E's. Let me stop there. I hope I haven't taken too much of your time, and I'm happy to try and answer any questions.
Oh, we greatly appreciate that. And a couple of observations. You mentioned fair fares. I think the biggest problem with fair fares is that they really need to do more outreach with that. A lot of people don't even know that it exists. So, I mean, the CSAs on that really should be stepped up. I was thrilled that you mentioned that you're dealing with high school students. One of the things that amazed me the most was I used to catch the E train out of Penn Station, and watching all these high school students hopping the turnstile. And I mean, these are kids in uniforms, so I'm assuming if they're wearing uniforms, they're probably going to private schools and stuff, and they can probably certainly afford to pay the fares, and yet they're jumping over the turnstiles. And, well, definitely we want to see, you know, fresh approaches to it.
Student metric cards, too.
Yeah. And while fresh approaches are great, sometimes even old approaches just need to be reinforced. I know the police can't be at every turnstile, at every station. It's just too overwhelming. But again, Penn Station, you very rarely see any police there. So I'm speaking, well, either the E train or you go to the other end to the 123, and you see people popping over. You very rarely see any police enforcement there, and it's like, this is a major station with major traffic, and you're not even having a police presence there. You know, I can imagine you could just run wild in one of the outer boroughs where there's, you know, a small station and no one's really watching anything. So, you know, I think you really have the major stations. I think we really have to do a better job on that. And with that, I'm get off my soapbox and, Andrew?
I do a lot of riding. I cannot take a trip anymore without noticing multiple fare evasions taking place. There are some folks at non-attended, non-booth, you know, the other end of stations that will wait for 3 or 4 trains for someone to exit through the slam gate, and then they will rush in. There are families that send their children under the turnstiles to go and open the slam gate, and then the entire family goes in. It is all walks of life doing this now. $550 million is an awful lot of service that could be provided. We have to do something. You mentioned other systems are struggling with this, but New York's system relies on the fare most heavily to pay the bills than any other system. And we have 40% of the transit users in the country.
Right.
So it's very important that we get this right.
Absolutely.
Before you start calling people, I just want to,
Okay.
so we're going to call on our members first.
Yeah.
In the room and online, and then, we'll get to Jason, that you said questions on this.
Okay, if we have time, because we have to start 1 o'clock for the next.
Right, but we built in a little 10 minutes.
Yeah, we got an extra 10 minutes, so.
So, Christopher, sorry, Jerry, go ahead.
Oh, we'll go with Sharon and then Christopher. Sharon?
Okay, and under the E, the education part, I think that it seems to me to be very helpful to have some kind of public, relations campaign that makes it clear that this is illegal and that the fare jumpers are robbing the other passengers. Other people just tend to say, oh, well, you know, they're jumping over the fares. The attitude has to really be changed among the ridership, I think, to really make, so that there's peer pressure for the people who are jumping, that to know that everybody else on the system is regarding them negatively for doing it.
Well, I appreciate the comment. You'll see in Jano's speech from back in April, I think the way he put it was that paying the fare isn't something you owe the MTA, it's something you owe each other. And that's a message that I think you'll see the panel getting behind. I don't know how many people saw this viral video of the fellow who entered at 125th with his dog and trained his...
Don't remind me, please.
Trained his dog to go around under the turnstile and open the fare gate. I mention it because if you dig into the comments section in that Instagram post, and I've read, I think, all 2,200 comments, you'll see quite a few from this ordinary New York. There's a healthy number that just sort of attaboys and people who think it's funny. But there's actually a lot of ordinary New Yorkers taking the time to go on Instagram and say, you know what, that's not funny, that's wrong. There's one comment that says, It's funny until the MTA starts cutting service, because of fare evasion. So that's a very strong view among our riders, among the riding public, and that's why this panel exists.
I thought you were gonna say there was a big rush to adopt dogs after that.
Why do I know you were gonna say that, Andrew?
Chris, you're up next.
Yes,
And
speaking
then we'll go to
about,
Stuart after that.
yeah, and speaking about dogs, 125th Street, and I'm glad you're bringing it up because it's a safety concern, because my mother and I were trying to get off at 125th on the left, and we can't even get off because there's a whole mob scene runs. And I mean, a lot of them run. That's just at 125th where Sharon is at Jamaica. You can't even get out in any station because the accessibility issues at any big major transit points, you can't get them out because we pay our fare. Either way, we go in or out. We need the safety for a senior or a person with disabilities. My mother is one of them who can't even get. I have to go in front of her just to make sure no one's going to hit her, because twice they almost did just the other day. And yes, I did put it in a complaint in, and thanks to Transit 34 and Transit 32, now they have someone near the gates, like this morning. So I'm glad there is some, but that's in one borough. But we need to see this in Queens, because Queens is a safety concern for transferring from the 7 train to Queens Boulevard corridor, transferring from another station, like the railroad or Metro North, that Jerry, you mentioned, the railroad. There is no safety at all for us. And, some of us don't want to have to use Cesarite sometimes because of traffic, but we need to use the proper transportation. We want to get off an accessible station, but not getting run over or getting hit, because if someone falls down and gets hurt, it's going to be a big mess. And I don't want to go over those words because it really upsets me, but it's like telling the seniors, why should I get on a train? Why should I get on a bus? If you can't even get on a bus, if people don't understand a wheelchair or a walker is getting on first, because they have to put them in the right area. The walker goes in a single seat, wheelchair is in the seating area. So can we please try to work on accessibility?
Sure. I'm glad to hear you got a response from the transit districts. They do have the frontline responsibility, and it's great to know that they were responsive to you.
My other hat was an explorer, and I did work with the community councils in those precincts. So I have a good relationship with the NYPD.
Great.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Jerry.
Stuart, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there live today. I had a resiliency meeting. Great presentation. But just 2 questions very quickly. I'm glad to hear you talked about social services aspect and trying to encourage people to, get access to fair media. But there was something I didn't hear, and maybe I missed this. So the people who you said are determined to try to beat the system, whatever the type of venue, whether it's the subway or through bridges and tunnels, that are going through the TAB or some other court process, have you looked at whether we need to look at the fines and penalties for chronic offenders, look at disincentives? Is that something that's part of the scope of what you're going to be doing? Or the people that are determined to beat the system, whether it's on their own or through selling fair media or whatever it would be?
Sure. You said you had 2 questions. Let me tackle that one first, and then we
Yeah.
can get to the other. So everything that you just mentioned is in scope for the panel. We are looking at the tab. We are looking at the penalty scheme in the regulations, looking at what sort of, what the legal path would be to making some changes to that. So that's all very much in scope. And the panel will actually be making a field visit to the tab to see the enforcement and hearing process with their own eyes. So that's all very much, part of what the panel's about.
All right, and once the panel's work ceases, who is the entity that will be monitoring whether these proposed enhancements work? Is there someone within MTA Central, or what's the plan on how we're going to monitor the evasion fixes and evasion losses post the panel?
Well, the first thing I'd say about that is that Chairman Lever is personally laser focused on these issues. This is a very high priority for him, and I think You are seeing today tremendous amount of senior management attention to all these issues, and that's going to continue. When the panel report is issued, it's going to have a list of recommendations, and each recommendation will have an implementation path. And there will be a lot of work that needs to be done across this agency and a lot of the agencies that we partner with on these issues, including NYPD, including HRA, and others. This is going to be a priority in the MPAC suite, I can assure you that, and that's not going to end with the issuance of the panel report. In fact, it begins with that.
All right, so once it's sorted and settled, what division or unit within the MTA is going to monitor it post the panel? I'd appreciate if they can share that with our group.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Alrighty. We have a gentleman here.
Yeah, just Mike Sand from Metro North. Just a quick question with the bridges and tunnels observation. You mentioned fraudulent license plates and concealed license plates. What about collections of pay by mail? What are the trends there, and is that part of the scope here, or is that a separate issue?
We view that as mostly a separate issue. When we talk about evasions of bridges and tunnels, we're talking primarily about the people who, sail through with a deliberate effort to avoid the toll. You've probably seen, there have been a lot of press reports about all the gizmos that people attach to their cars, the way they obscure license plates, rip license plates. There are these James Bond devices, you can buy them online that will actually roll a shutter down and conceal your license plate with a remote. There are devices that will flip your license plate and display a fake one as you approach a license plate reader. All of that, we do evasion measurement of bridges and tunnels is relatively easy compared to the other systems because we've got the tolling gantries, we've got the automated license plate readers, and we know that the Easy Pass saturation is extremely high, and we're collecting from about 95% of the drivers. So, the bill by mail system and the follow-up on bill by mail, that's a legitimate payment option if you drive through without an Easy Pass, which some people do. We have to mail you the bill, and the follow-up on that, we haven't really defined that internally as a form of evasion, but certainly the bridges and tunnels team is extremely focused on that and trying every day to get better at that.
Okay, all right, hold on. No, we still have
I think you've got a more interesting speaker who just walked in.
Well, I think we have time for him. Walter, you're up. Walter's from Metro North, and
Yes, the New York County District Attorney recently sent what I think is a very bad, unfortunate message by saying he's not going to prosecute what he considers to be minor crimes such as fare evasion. And a lot of people hearing that will say, well, what the heck, why should I pay the fare? They're not going to do anything about it anyway. And I think a lot of police officers probably figure, why should I bother issuing summonses to these people when the DA isn't even going to prosecute them, at least not in Manhattan? Are you hopefully working with the Manhattan DA to get him to change his mind on that subject?
Good luck with that.
We're in touch with all 5 DAs, and there's 5 DAs with a range of approaches to these issues. A couple of things I can say about that. I think you're probably referring to the day 1 memo that DA Bragg issued when he was sworn into office. And he did say in that memo that fare evasion was mentioned as an example of a minor crime that generally wouldn't be prosecuted. That was really not a policy change. That goes back really to 2017, 2018, and a policy change that was made by DA Vance. And he's really just continuing it. So a couple of things I think are important to note there. One is that that did trigger a significant change in police response. So today, and the public data show this, over 95% of police encounters on fare evasion result in a civil summons and not a criminal escalation. The PD has a published policy where they'll only escalate if the evasion is linked to recidivist evasion or to a serious crime. It's also part of DA Bragg's statement, got less attention because it's sort of the fine print, but it's there and it's important, is that he will prosecute and other DAs will prosecute when the evasion is linked to a more serious offense. So that policy change of the individual act of fare evasion generally not resulting in criminal treatment, that's been with us for a solid 5 years now. It's not new, and The question really is how can you get all 5 DAs aligned around, what they will prosecute, and that's something the town's actively working on.
Okay, thank you.
One question from Karen Hamilton,
Okay.
who is a member, who asked, how many people who have paid paying fares report not being able to afford and are eligible for fair fares?
I'm not sure that there's great data available on how many fare evaders are doing it for economic reasons. There's certainly plenty of research out there that suggests that inability to pay is a major contributor to fare evasion. And again, we think it's just good common sense that a subsidy program that's better known, better enrolled, and perhaps more generous is going to make a material dent in the problem. So.
All right, thank you.
If anybody has any additional questions for Jeremy, you can send them to me, ldaglian@mtahq.org, and I will get them to Jeremy.
I just have one more
Okay.
question. Okay, we touched on subways quite a bit. We really didn't touch on commuter rail. And we have people in commuter rail who have given, have signed that the IOUs, so to speak, 15 and 20 times. Now, that almost, that escalates to hundreds of dollars. And where are we on that with prosecuting those people? And I understand from some of the conductors that they get some grief from their movement bureau, because they don't want to delay trains. So it's like, just let it go. But if you get somebody and they come up on your sheet and it says this is the 18th time this person is, asking for an IOU, something needs to be done there. That needs to be advertised so that the other people who are doing the same scam, and there are many, will get the message that, hey, if I do that, I'm liable, to get arrested.
Sure.
Now you know why I keep asking about you.
Yeah,
I think I get it.
I'm the one who keeps nudging her.
So a couple of things to say about that. First, there is a real balance to be struck between evasion enforcement and keeping service running. That's a real issue. There's a balance to be struck between evasion enforcement and the safety of our people, especially our people who are not law enforcement, like a conductor. So those are very real concerns, and finding the right balance there is a challenge. I will say that, and we saw this when we went out on our Metro North field visit with the panel, that the conductors are very attuned to this issue. They're trained on it. And the protocol, is that if they come across, it's called a frequent flyer in terms of non-payment, that they are carrying lists. We know who those folks are, and the protocol is that if one of them is again refusing to pay, that the conductor doesn't attempt to enforce. The conductor's instructions are to call the MTA PD, who are patrolling in cars up and down our train lines, and they will meet the train at the next station and take over from there. And the typical response would be a summons, which is a criminal summons. It's returnable usually to the local court closest to where the evasion offense happened. So you might see the enforcement actually happen in the town or village court up and down LIRR or Metro North. And the person will typically be removed from the train by the officer. It tends to happen in a low-key and very common, peaceful way, but there's sort of a handoff from the conductor to the MTA PD, and that's a critical part of the process.
As it should be.
So,
And when former Transit Police Chief Delatorre was in charge, I was talking to him at a particular subway entrance, and while I was talking to him, 8 people went through the slam gate. He wanted to actually get 5 tab summonses. You could be actually banned from the system, and if you were caught in the system again, you could be trespassing and get a trespassing charge. So he was really very much aware of the need to do something.
Okay, well, I think that there is a kind of limited legal authority today to ban folks in the system. It's for sexual assault or assault on an MTA employee. You may have seen in the news, our leadership team actually at court in the Bronx asking the judge to issue a ban in the case of an employee assault recently. I'm not sure, there is no current legal authority that would allow us to do that in the context of fare evasion. If people are interested in taking a deeper dive on this, I'd refer you to the NYPD. They have a published policy on this, where, you know, after X instances of evasion, unpaid summonses, or a number of summonses over a period of time, we begin to escalate towards law enforcement treatment, criminal treatment. So, and that's the current remedy.
Believe it or not, there was an old episode of Seinfeld where they see a sign on a bus, they're riding a bus that says fare evasion doesn't save you time, it gets you time.
So this is one of the reasons, because there are people, on camera who have questions and comments. I know that there are more in the room. It's one of the reasons why PCAC is going to sit down with Jeremy, and share thoughts, comments, and questions, and have a dialogue.
We greatly appreciate your time. And
We'll continue that again, so if anybody here who's not a member of PCAC has questions, comments, et cetera, please email them to me, lstagling@mca.org.
Okay.
Jerry, one quick question.
Thank you
One
so much.
quick,
Oh, Randy, yeah, you gotta be quick, because we're gonna get to the next speaker.
yeah, right. Who gets the revenue? The towns or the MTA for those people that were scored off the train?
Don't hold me to this, but I think if you pay a summons to the local court, that the revenue is held locally.
Okay, thank you.
But that's
All right.
kind of the best guess.
All right, thanks, Randy. Okay,
Thank
so,
you so much, Jeremy, and Marisol will get your question answered, because I know that there's something that we have discussed, and I'll get back to you directly.
okay, at this time, I'm just gonna turn the meeting over to one of our board members, Trudy Mason, to introduce our next guest.
Let me get Mr. to see what he can do.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Really appreciate it. The whole chair over.
That's fine.
No, over here, sir. Over here.
There we go.
That's why he didn't. No, the camera's in front of you, it's a different camera. It's right over here. If Lisa says that to use this camera, we gotta use this camera.
So this camera right here is the one that everybody can see and that records.
Now,
We're gonna,
Only one familiar face here.
Yeah.
Two.
Hi,
Andrew.
Trudy.
Yes.
Have we met?
No, I'm a familiar face.
What's your name?
Sharon Ho.
Oh, my
well,
God.
we're all
How are
gonna,
you?
I'm good, how are you?
we're all gonna,
I know.
everybody, would you like that everybody, the members of the PCAC introduce themselves
Sure.
now or when they speak? However you wanna do it.
Whatever they want.
Okay, well, maybe we can do that right now, and, because they all are gonna have questions and everything else for you, but let's just the PCAC members, not the guests, because otherwise that'll take the whole time, so.
I'm Jerry Brangman, I'm the chairman of the PCAC, and also on the Wyoming Engineer Council. And, yep.
And Andrew, I think you know.
Let people introduce themselves when they ask me questions, which I hope that you do.
Okay, there is one person, though, that I spoke to you about, and that's Randy Glucksman, who was up there, who used to work, he was probably the only other person who was with the MTA when I was there, and he is now the head of the Metro North Commuter Council. Randy, you want to wave or say hello?
Yeah, he did.
Okay, great.
And the board member.
And a board member.
Hi, excuse myself. I'm Natalia
Yeah.
Executive
Yeah,
Director.
we'll do that with you. And well, you might as well give the staff introduce themselves. Hello, that's the CGL, the administrative assistant.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll do your intro.
Anyway, as I said, 40-some odd years ago, more than that, I had the great honor and privilege of working with Dick Ravitch, working for Dick Ravitch, when he was the chairman of the MTA. Before he came to the MTA, many of you, I'm sure, know this, but let me just tell you why it is so opportune and propitious that he is with us today. Before Dick came to the MTA, he first helped get the UDC, the Urban Development Corporation, out of bankruptcy, then working with Victor Gottbaum and Fields Rowan and all kinds of brilliant, wonderful people who he was the most, I think, the most brilliant of all of them. Anyway, they got New York City out of bankruptcy. Some of you were around then. some of you weren't, but there was the horrible, horrible fiscal crisis. And then he came to the MTA, which was, as it is now, no, a lot worse, in a fiscal crisis of its own. He took over as the chair of the MTA, and he developed, among other things, which we talk about all the time, the capital program, so many other ideas. And the most wonderful thing that he did is that he established the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA. Otherwise, we would not be here today. And I had the pleasure of carrying that legislation, which he wrote. I'm just like, I carry the packages all the time, and I carry them up to Albany for him, and that's why we now have all of you here. And there's so much more that I could say, except that I have, over the years, learned so much from this man, and he is really, and of course you all know that he then became eventually lieutenant governor, or 1,000 other titles that I could give him. But the title that I like best is, I'd like you all to meet my friend, Dick Ravitch.
Thank you. And it's the first time I've been back, and it's very emotional for me. I thought I'd begin briefly by telling you when Hugh Carey asked me to be chairman of MTA, I was waiting in his office to plead with him not to defund Channel 13, on whose board I was on. And instead of talking to me about Channel 13, he said, I want you to become chairman of the MTA. And I had a pretty good relationship with him by then. And I said, are you out of your cotton picking mind? You don't ride the subway. I do. And he said, I won't take no for an answer. Anyway, I agreed. He announced me. And when he announced me, he said the fare would not go up for a year. As soon as I agreed to do it, I met with the staff of the MTA and found out there was no way in the world we could wait a year. We were out of money. So when I went for my confirmation hearing in Albany with the state senate, I said to the chairman, ask me whether I'll raise the fare. And he said, I don't want to embarrass you. And I said, God damn it, ask me the question. So he says in the hearing, Mr. Ravitch, are any of these circumstances under which you would raise the fare? I said, of course, if I didn't have enough money to run a state system. Headline, Ravitch contradicts governor. The governor called me that very day that the newspaper story came out, said, come on over to the mansion for a drink. And he said, thank God you got me off the hook. That tells you more about Hugh Carey, anyway. I soon came to realize that I went to 207th Street, I went to Coney Island. I said, what a shithole both are. There's not enough money to fix the system, let alone buy new equipment, which was desperately needed. I talked to the people at the operating level, and then I realized I had to raise the fare right away. And I didn't know where my board would sit. So I took a private room for dinner. I'm just telling you this for fun. And Carol Bellamy, then president of the city council, was on the board. And I belong to a club that now, and for years, has admitted women, but at that point in 1979, it did not admit women. And Carol called me up and said, are you out of your cotton picking mind? You think I'm going to come to a club that doesn't admit women? Well, I said, oh my God, I got a problem. So I got a room at the Yale Club. I had half the board at the Yale Club, half the board at the Century Club. I spent the whole night running back and forth until I was sure I had the votes to raise the fare the next day, which I did. But that's just for fun to tell you that. Let me get to the current situation. I think Donald's a good leader, competent guy. I think Kevin Willens, the new chief financial officer, is is a very able guy, is very realistic about the numbers. I believe that, number one, gotta repay the loan from the Federal Reserve Board right away. So that's out of the picture. It's not a continuing debt, and it's not going to impair future numbers. Number two, I think using the remaining federal funds should be spread out over a number of years, and therefore have to deal with the operating budget in 2023. And part of the federal money should be used then, but it should not all be used then, and to create an even bigger problem in 2024. I think it should be spread out. Number two, I believe that, I'll shut up in a minute, you can ask questions. Sharon is upstairs.
You said three, 'cause you said
No, I
two
said
twice.
tree.
Number three, 'cause you said two twice.
Yeah.
Three.
Next,
Okay.
I believe,
Vern, just listen.
I believe the congestion pricing is going to be eviscerated. I don't think it's been handled well. I think it's become a major political issue, and there is no way in the world it's going to produce $1 billion a year to support $15 billion of essential capital expenditure. Therefore, the MTA is going to, or the state of New York is going to have the burden this year to face up to that reality and to begin to generate a new revenue source. Now, if I may, at the risk of sounding self-serving, when I realized how much money the MTA needed, the only possible source of capital was borrowing. And I got the legislature to create a whole series of taxes, the proceeds of which were dedicated to support MTA borrowers. We have to do that again. We can't wait. We have to start this year. We should look at the current fiscal situation over a 5-year period, not just over this year or next year. And if we do that, you'll see that we need state aid in this next session of the legislature. We have a new governor who has a lot of faith in Jano, and I think Jano will do the right thing. But more importantly, he's the one who has to get the legislature to vote for new taxes for the MTA. There's no choice, but it's a painful decision, given the fact that, number one, New York taxpayers now have pay the highest taxes of any citizens in the United States, and New Yorkers have the highest amount of debt of any citizen in the United States. And the state owes the Federal Unemployment Insurance Fund $7 billion. And if it doesn't repay it, and currently they have no plan to get the legislature to appropriate the money, because the legislature would have to create new taxes for that. But the federal government has the statutory power to, if the state doesn't repay the loan, the federal government can impose a tax on all employers in New York, which is the equivalent impact on our economy. So we might as well face up to the reality, and hopefully the governor will learn once she is reelected, and I think she will be, not by as large a margin as she hoped, but her opponent is a silly Trumpite, and in my view has no chance of getting elected in the state of New York. So I think what you guys can do, and the reason I was so willing to comment through these requests, was to say, you've got to get the board, Dano, and then the governor to address this problem now. Don't defer it. Don't take the easy course and use all the federal money. I'm not talking about the Federal Reserve money that I've said should be repaid. I'm talking about all the U.S. Treasury money that we now have. Don't spread it all this year and postpone the problem to next year. Deal with it now. Next year is going to be even more painful, but the state is going to be facing what I call the fiscal cliff, which everybody, New York City is going to face, and most states around the country are going to face when they use up the largesse they got from the feds this year. So, to use the vernacular, don't forgive me, the so-and-so is going to hit the fan in 2025, no matter what. Let's start dealing with it now. Let's tell the truth to the legislature. Let's get the legislature to start dealing with the issue in 2023. They can meet and not wait. And spread the federal money out. Anyway, that's my message. I'm urging you, and now I'm going to shut up.
No, you're not. No, you're not. And because you also told me you wrote an op-ed about Penn Station, and you said you were going to talk about that also, and I think that will be, that these people would like to hear about it.
I would like to hear about that, but I have a specific question about what you
No, we
just
don't-
talked
go ahead and talk
about whether you have ideas for what taxes, or if you've looked at sources of revenue.
Sure. I'd be glad to do that. Can I answer the first question?
Sure,
first?
of course.
Trudy correctly points out that I believe that, how do you want me to do it?
Just talk, the way you wrote it in the op-ed.
Well, I don't know if you saw my op-ed. I think this state, this is one of the things to New York State money. I think the state's got to fix Penn Station. To rely on what Vornado might do 5 years from now. Right now, there's 23% vacancy rate in the office space in New York. There is no chance Vornado is going to build office buildings there. Second of all, I think it's outrageous to take the city of New York's interest in the property, both in terms of their zoning power, take it away from them as inappropriate, and the tax revenue that were implicit in the deal that they contemplate making with Vornado. And besides, it's not going to happen. There's a 23% vacancy rate. Nobody's going to build office buildings now. So they're kidding themselves. Penn Station's got to be fixed. That's a high priority. It's as high a priority as making sure the subways and the computer rail continue to function. Oh, and I want to make one more general observation, if I may. I believe cities are the greatest socializing institutions that mankind ever created. And I am optimistic about New York's recovery. I think people are going to be coming back, and with increasing frequency. That is, some people say to me, that's a hope, Dick. It's not a realistic assessment. It is a hope, but it's my assessment for whatever it's worth. I go to a restaurant and a bar, the owner of which is a good friend of mine, and he says to me, I gauge the recovery by how many young people come into this place 5 o'clock, to boys to meet girls and girls to meet boys. And that number is increasing. He also owns a chain of other restaurants, and he's seen a steady increase in their usage. So I have no other evidence, except I believe sports, opera, music, theaters opening up. I was just looking at a list of all the shows I want to see, and they're all opening later in September or January or February. Broadway is gonna be booming next spring. Carnegie Hall, the chairman of Carnegie Hall is a friend of mine. They are planning a very exhausting schedule. I'm a supporter of on the board of the opera, and I support the opera, and I see what they're doing. So I'm an optimist. I appreciate the fact that Jano and Kevin have got to be realistic in their assessments. That's why they need to start getting help this year from the legislature, and they need you to do that.
Okay.
Now I'll shut up.
Just before we get to questions, there was one other staff member former staff member, or we still consider him one of us, who is up now in San Diego. And Bradley Baxter, Bradley, your picture disappeared, but I hope you're still here. And when he came here as an intern 8 years ago, the one person who we always talked about was Dick Ravitch. So he had phoned in from, I just want to acknowledge him, because we met the other staff. Yeah.
Bradley, are you there, or?
No?
I guess not.
He's there, but his camera's off.
He might have,
Camera's on, but he's
he might have stepped away,
Anyway,
okay.
oh, there he is.
No, that's Larry.
Hi, Larry.
Okay, whatever, I just wanted to acknowledge him since you met the other staff, I thought that we should acknowledge him.
There he is.
All right, there he is.
There he is, Bradley.
Bradley, there.
Did you hear?
Say hello.
Say hello. Turn on your sound.
Hi. No, I didn't hear anything you just said. I had to go close my door because sirens were going by.
That's that you have admired him since you came here as an intern. And that's why you are all the way in San Diego now, but you still joined us today. And
Yes.
Brett did some wonderful things for us, and we miss him already, and it's only 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bradley. Lisa.
In that vein, our actual former intern who, just left us a week ago, did his thesis, wrote a thesis about you.
Who was that?
And his name was Shaul Picker, and his father's here today with a copy of it for you. So,
Oh, great.
I'll give that to you. So I just wanted to continue your.
I hope he didn't tell all the bad things.
That's the reason to find out.
So I did want to, though, thank you tremendously, because the operating funds are so important, and going to Albany and talking to the legislature. I just wanted to see if you had any specific thoughts, because that's really where the, really where the details are in the devil.
I think as long as the majority of cars still operate on gas, we're going to put a gas tax. And that might accelerate the purchase of electric cars, which is a good thing. But in the foreseeable future, there will be a lot of people buying gasoline, including me. And we're going to have a tax on gas. The last time we tried, it was bitterly opposed by the head of the Hotel Workers Union. Fortunately, isn't there. I do not know what influence they will have on Kathy Hochul. But I think that's a tax that can produce a calculable amount of revenue for the MTA. Although if that doesn't work, I would be glad to consider any other tax. An increase on the wholesale fuel tax, which I got approved back many years ago, still is a source of revenue to service MTA debt. Does that answer your question, Liz?
Thank you.
All right, so we'll move on to the members. Mr. Randy. Randy, while you're there, can we?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope that you're happy with that title. I know that Trudy shared one of the letters with you, and there was a second letter which I could not find. I really wish I had found it. In 1980, I was a motorman and I was on strike. And so a couple after the strike was finally settled, a letter came from you to everyone who was on strike saying that under the Taylor law, we'd have to give back 2 days pay for every day that we were on strike. And I appealed it and it got turned down. So I just wanted to let you know there's a good letter and a bad letter, but thank you for being there. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to be there today to greet you in person, but maybe Trudy could work something out there. We have a coffee or something like that.
Anytime.
That's my statement.
Reminds me of another story. I think it was 1980.
Yeah,
Ed
April
Koch-
8, 1980.
1980, Ed Koch goes on television, the mayor, and he says, "You don't like the subways, don't blame me, blame rabbits." And then, the next day, there's a front page story in the New York Times. The mayor called all the subway workers loungers and loafers. And I had a press conference, and I said basically, the mayor is full of shit. The transit workers are hardworking, able people working under difficult circumstances. Every newspaper wrote an editorial criticizing Koch. 2 days later, Koch has a press conference in City Hall, and he says, "I'm holding out the surrender flag. I apologize. I shouldn't have said that. Ravitch is right." And my wife said, "You know, he really ate crow. We should invite him to have Chinese food Sunday night." I said, "You call him, I'm not." She called him, and Ed Koch came to dinner full of apologies. And he never said another critical word.
So what did you serve, crow?
Chinese food, I remember. Anyway, sorry. Thought you'd get a laugh out of the anecdote.
Andrew, do you have a question in there?
Yeah. I agree with you, Dick, on the gas tax. Gas varies from week to week, from gas station to gas station. You wouldn't even feel it depending on how much it was, obviously. But you did say something in your earlier talk about you think congestion pricing is going to be gutted. Are you referring to the number of exemptions that are likely to be granted?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
And the number of people are going to cheat. The number of people are going to put Jersey plates on their cars.
Yeah, I mean, every description of it from people that are opposed to it gives the worst case. I'm not paying $23 when obviously it could be as little as $9. And if you're using an MTA or a Port Authority bridge or tunnel, you might get credit for that, depending on what the TMRB does. So it's not really getting a fair shake with all of the and it being an election year, of course, and the press and everybody. But everybody's giving a worst-case scenario. It could improve circulation, make it easier to drive with less traffic, make it a quicker trip for people, improve our air quality, and make a major contribution to the capital plan.
I agree with that fully. But I don't think it's going to produce the $1 billion which are subsumed to support $15 billion of necessary capital spending. So that's why the legislature is going to have to face up to that next year, when we begin to get a sense of what revenue, in fact, congestion pricing will produce.
Okay, do we have any other council members that have questions?
You had a question, Sharon.
No, I was correcting you.
Did you?
Yeah, you said, you had the wrong number of your item, that was all. I forgive you.
Stewart,
Stuart,
you're up.
Yes, thank you. Just hitting the mute button. So your fiscal wisdom is very much appreciated. But if there's something you would want to share with us, if you were still at the helm today, was there some unfinished business that you think we should still be focusing on as a, as a body, looking across all the systems?
Well, that's a fair question. I'm not sure I know enough to offer a rational answer to that. It's
Or give me an irrational one. No,
well,
something that we should be tackling that you think, other than the fiscal wisdom that you shared.
yes, I think there's one thing.
Yeah.
I think we have to face up to the fact that we have to review our relationship with the labor unions. There is no reason that there shouldn't be consideration given going to one-man trains on certain routes. There should be consideration given to looking at the contract with the union and revising it in light of the vastly diminished resources. Any normal employer, if their industry would be adversely affected, would go to the union representing their employees and seeking some kind of accommodation, even if it were only conditional on a revival of transit usage. But I think the absolutely essential, and this can happen after the election, because rightly or wrongly, I don't think Kathy Hochul is going to risk it before November, but this doesn't have to happen before November.
Right.
But I think, yes, dealing with the union in a realistic, honest way, and attempting to reduce labor costs is part of the solution.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Mr. Ravitch, do you have an opinion of John Lieber?
Hold on. Andrew had something to say.
And, yeah. All right, Andrew and then Bert.
Yeah, I just would say that serving on the board with John Samuelson and Norman Brown and Vinnie Tessitore, they have really done a lion's share of trying to get riders back on board and promoting the system. So, you know, I know what you're saying bears a lot of fruit, but you should know that they are also out there trying to get riders back, trying to make things better. They supported our freedom ticket proposal for the Long Island Railroad branches that are within the city limits. They've done their share on the other side as well. Just wanted to say that for the record.
Yeah, but they haven't done anything that affects their membership.
Right.
Well, I don't think, many of you may not remember when the MTA went on strike, and John Law was the head of the TWU at that time. And I'll never forget going into one of their meetings where you think that they're enemies, and there are Dick Ravitch and John Law, literally like the best of friends, publicly not, but, and I'm assuming that's the kind of relationship that you're talking about.
Well, no, that was John Law had a contingency of extremely militant people who were trying to take the leadership away from him. He had difficulty getting them to agree to a solution that he and I had agreed to. It ultimately worked.
Bert has a question.
Bert, yep.
Sharon has a question, and we have a question on line as well.
All right, so Bert, you go.
Mr. Ravitch, I spent a lot of years in the railroad industry, and I remember we got rid of one operating man off a train.
Yes, I do.
And it cost a lot of money, but it was better in the future.
What could be done in some ways too.
That's what
We had Opto for a long time. One-person train operation. Opto. Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Was the C train or was it the L train?
The G for sure.
Definitely the G.
Mr. Ravitch, do you have an opinion of John Lieber?
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sharon.
What?
No, if there's somebody breaking.
Yeah, go ahead, Sharon.
What other options for taxes do you see besides the fuel tax?
I see an option to have a special addition to the income tax, the corporate income tax. But as I said, this is in the context of the state having this obligation to the Federal Unemployment Insurance Fund, and we have not yet been told by the governor whether she intends to repay it, in which case she's going to have to ask the legislature for a $7 to $8 billion appropriation. And the money is there. It's going to require a new tax revenue. So there are competing needs, the MTA being only one. And what the governor decides to do when she faces all of this in January is going to be very, very important. And there's no limit conceptually to the things you can tax. It's a question of measuring the impact of any tax increase on the economy on move-outs, which are real concern to me.
Public or is he?
We had a question, yes, we had a question from, Mr. Rowland, what do you think of John Samuelson's idea of moving the $1 billion congestion pricing lockbox money over to operating instead of capital?
I think it's absolutely critical. And therefore, that's why I said earlier, the MTA or the legislature would have to deal with providing a source of revenue for our capital program. If I didn't make it clear. Yeah.
Lisa, can we see you on a second? Is there anybody with their hand up? Any of our people? Any of the council members?
Yeah, not council member.
We have all our council members here. Any questions? All right.
We have some questions.
Sharon has another one.
Yeah, what kind of relationship do you have with the governor?
Well, I knew Kathy when she worked for Pat Moynihan, and then when she worked for Bob Wilbur in M&T Bank. I have not had occasion to spend any time with her in these last few months that I have offered to. She has not yet taken advantage of it.
Two hands raised. Are there any questions?
All right, so I guess Boynton was the first one to go up.
Yes, go then.
Who?
Bowden, right?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
It's great to be among fellow New Yorkers because I'm not in New York City at this point in time. I haven't heard such an accent in months. I'm in Richmond, Virginia. I'm actually an MD, and I worked in Williamsburg in a healthcare clinic for poor people. And I had so much obesity in 2005 that I decided to solve the problem in a different way. And there's, amazingly, though I'm a physician, I came up with an approach to apply what is used in marathons to track runners to pedestrians. And the coming of Link NYC and the coming of more technology, a variety of batteries, et cetera. Now the OmniCard, in brief, the OmniCard could serve as a Fitbit with very little enhancement, very inexpensive enhancement. Let's put it that way. I mean, it could be independent of the OmniCard, but that would be the model. And it would link up with Link NYC. Now, Link NYC started around 2016. So that, so I've actually left some information with Lisa Daglian. And, I'd like just to be able to follow up on this. That's the only thing I'm asking.
Okay, yeah, just leave the information with Lisa and, does she have your email address? Okay.
Yes. Email and my New York telephone.
Okay, great. We'll do that then. Thank you, sir.
How about
Let's just,
Dan Bianco.
all right, we'll do Dan Bianco, then we'll do the gentleman at the end of the hall, and then we'll do Kevin.
Hi, thanks for giving me some time. I'll try to be brief because I know there's larger issues the MTA is dealing with, but I just wanted to speak about the utilization of digital signage throughout the system. I just wanted to either make comment or ask a question if there's any kind of standards in place when it comes to digital signage. An egregious use of digital signage is like at Moynihan Station with that huge, beautiful display. It's often used to advertise gambling. So it's not just the content of the signage, but also the placement of the signage. And a lot of stations, when you come down to a platform, you have to walk over 100 feet to see a train info display.
Yeah. Can you hold this for our next section?
Yeah, for the new.
Oh, sure.
Business, old business.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're just gonna go. Kevin Duggan from the AM. Dugan, sorry.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Thanks for taking my question. I have a question for Mr. Ravich. I was interested in what you're talking about, congestion pricing being eviscerated and the, due to people cheating tolls or exemptions. I was wondering, what would you say to the governor and the MTA chair, how they can still get it right? Or, are there any of the scenarios that they've laid out that you thought were particularly could work well?
All I know is what I read in the papers and hear on your radio station. And I don't know to what extent it's going to be eviscerated or where or what's going to be changed. I do know, I believe, I shouldn't say no, I believe it's not going to produce $1 billion in revenue that will enable the MTA to borrow $15 billion. I believe the $15 billion is an honest and real number about their capital needs. So I think the state is going to have to examine next year what it looks like with congestion pricing when it gets through all the political crap that it's going through. They're going to have to make a judgment as to how much they're going to be able to borrow against it. Sharon.
I'm sorry, so look, give this gentleman down the end.
David Kupferberg, no relation to Max Kupferberg. What is your position regarding bus stop spacing? Because the Queen Bus Network redesign is now undergoing the draft phase. And I did my own analysis, and I think that 95, solely based on this is the 95% of the bus stops.
I think this is more of a
What
old
is your
business, new
position
business.
on it?
I don't have one, to be honest with you.
Okay.
We have somebody from the jail.
All right, well, he didn't raise his hand. Sharon?
Richard, what's your position on selling station sponsorship to raise money?
Anything that'll raise money is my favor. And if they're rich guys who want to have a subway station named after them and are willing to write a check, God bless them. I name it after anyone except Adolf Hitler.
Well, he ain't gonna contribute, so.
That's right.
Jason, you have a question?
Yes. Jason Anthony here from the Amazon Labor Union. As you know, Amazon is since 2018 has been expanding largely in Staten Island.
Yep.
Right now, there's 4 facilities within the borough itself. And right now, there's only 2 bus routes that go to all 4 buildings, the S40 and the S90. And I take those buses all the time to work, to and from work. And what the MTA is going to do, what do you think that the MTA should do regarding providing shuttle buses to those workers that go to and from work daily, because the CDTA
I'm not familiar with
in
the
Albany.
Jason, that's more of a new business.
Jerry, come on, don't brush this off, because, come on. Albany provides shuttle buses to these workers.
Jason, let me say that without understanding the particulars of it or the cost of it, of course I believe the MTA should maximize transportation for the new employees, particularly as I hear they're joining unions.
Thank you.
All right, Andrew?
Dick,
Yeah.
what about value capture? Shouldn't we be also trying to get the legislature to approve value capture? Because obviously public transportation improves the value of anything. Wouldn't that be a good source of
Yeah, that would be something to discuss with with Springer and people in New York City. Because to the extent that subway improvements will improve neighborhoods, it should increase the tax base there too. And the city should be willing to do something. But that's not next year's revenue. We need revenue next
right away?
year.
Yep.
You and I talked about bringing ridership back, because one of the source of revenue was riders. And this whole thing about safety. And I will hope you will share with everybody here how different it was way back when the biggest safety and security problem had to do with graffiti. And maybe if we got all the graffiti artists who are now multi-million-dollar artists to do something, but you say it better than I ever can, so I just hope you can share with.
Dave Koch arranged to have the police hire a 16-year-old kid who was smearing up subway cars. And I called him and I said, "You stupid SOB. Not the way to do this." And he didn't relent. So I called the DA of the Bronx. And then I called the judge who had the case. And in the meantime, the kid was convicted. And he was sent to Rikers Island. And I got, shortly thereafter, I got a judge to release him. And that was the end of criminalizing graffiti. And it also was the peak. It stopped happening as a result, in large part, of those incidents.
His name Basquet by any chance? Was his name Basquet by any chance?
I don't remember, to be honest with you.
His paintings are going for $20 million now. Or more.
What?
His paintings are going for more than $20 million. That's what.
And he started as a graffiti.
I think.
Well, tell him he should give half of it to the
Yeah, he
NBA.
did.
All right, folks.
Clayton has a question on the hill.
Oh, I didn't see him raise his hand.
Where's Clayton?
He's here. Okay, Clayton, you're on.
All right, Clayton.
Hey, Dave, how you doing? I'm
Nope.
wondering if you could share your take with the room on some of the, you mentioned the congestion pricing revenues may not be up to snuff, but I'm also interested in your take on the MTA's costs right now, particularly when it comes to how much money the region is requesting from the federal government. The Gateway Tunnel cost just went up by $2 billion. The MTA is asking the FTA for $3.4 billion for Second Ave subway phase 2. I mean, does that, in your eyes, does that shrink the MTA's opportunities to get federal funding for other projects just because those projects are taking up the pie?
To give you an honest answer, Clayton, I put in a call to my friend, the Undersecretary of Transportation, but didn't get through to her before today's meeting, because I wanted to be able to ask her how much of that infrastructure money we could conceivably use to defray MTA out-of-pocket expenditures. But I think that's a legitimate question for you to ask Polly, and on behalf of Buttigieg, and good question. I don't know the answer.
All right, about 1:45, so we want to leave some time for old business and new business. So, Mr. Ravitch, I'd like to thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
Thank everybody online too.
By the way, I just saw a flash on my phone. Queen Elizabeth died.
Oh, wow. Just this morning, they were saying they were worried.
Yeah, they made
96.
the announcement.
What a contrast.
No, that's right.
So we go down to old business.
I'll let you know.
Anybody have any old business they want to bring up?
Yeah, I do, Jerry. Jerry, since it's been, so long, I'm glad we really have good speakers, and, we've been doing a lot of good meetings and getting good hot topics, I'm just twist tongue, and don't start, Andrew. As we are coming into the end of the year, are we gonna be planning to do anything, more planning with the PCAC coming up now for next year? 'Cause since I know we have 3 staffs, but with newer staffs, I was thinking if we're gonna be doing any new surveys for, how services have been getting a little better back into service, like one, accessibility, 2, as Sharon mentioned, fare evasion, and Stuart mentioned 3. The third one would be the cleaning.
So I'm gonna jump in.
Yeah, go ahead.
We have 3 staff people, and we
Yeah,
can't.
we're kind of limited right now.
Well, I didn't say now, I said future.
Future, yeah.
Yeah,
In the future, why don't we talk about that at a future meeting?
At a future meeting.
This is it. And fair evasion, quite honestly, I think that we should wait to see what the outcome of the fair evasion task force is and the report. I don't think that we need to mirror the work that they're doing, because unbelievably excellent. So let's see what it looks like before we decide, and let's meet with them.
And
before we
Lisa,
decide what
just
we're
for the record, because in case somebody didn't hear me, I said not now, but I want to say future.
Okay, but
Yeah,
then we can plan, once we have planning,
Future.
other people to plan with. Right now, we're planning to keep our head above water.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying, yeah.
We're hoping that if everything goes according to plan, we should have our 2 staff members by, the first of the year?
That's hopeful, yeah.
Maybe I'm being a little optimistic, but we'll definitely have our associate director by then. But
Lisa, I didn't ask our speaker, do we have any time frame for what he talked about?
Thank you so
My
much.
pleasure.
Thanks again, sir. Thank you very much.
Good luck to you all.
We hope you come back. But hopefully we can, go to all meet with you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You're the first one to ask me, but I'm ready to go back.
Terrific.
I missed Albany. I want to tell you one other cute story before I go, if you have time.
Yeah, one
One more cute story. When Ed Koch called me one day, he said, I'm going to court with John Law in jail and to stop this strike. I said, you're out of your cotton picking mind. John Law has an internal political problem, and he's not the bad guy. I have a very close relationship with him. He said, I don't care. He's head of the union. I'm putting him in jail. He went to the court in Brooklyn, Supreme Court, and asked the judge or the city formally filed a request to put the heads of the union in jail. Well, I was so outraged by this because I was trying to help John Law deal with a dissident group in his union. And the thing that would have helped them enormously, it would be if the mayor was the enemy, would have put John Law in jail. What did I do? I was desperate. I happen to know Milt Mullins, who was chief judge of the appellate division of the Supreme Court in Brooklyn. He was an old dear friend. He'd been the head of housing, and that was my business. And I called Milt, and I had the police drive me to Brooklyn, and I had a drink with Milt. I said, you gotta help me. You gotta tell this judge, tell the mayor to go to hell. And that's exactly what happened. John Law never went to jail. And a week later, we settled the strike. The cops came close to screwing the whole thing up. I thought you'd get a kick out of it.
Okay.
We were good friends till the day of his death. Yes.
Okay, anybody else on the old business, new business?
Bert had a question.
Bert, you good?
So, in terms of the release of the fair vision
Yeah, I mean-
report, November.
We'll be-
November is big goal. Before the end of the year, I'd say,
Is there anything on the chat we need to look at, or any hands up on, well, we only have one screen now, so some people already dropped off.
Dan is going to email me his query about signage, and I'll get it to the right people, and I have the,
Lisa, if it's regarding Long Island Railroad, I know they've been putting up the new larger ones. The new larger signs are going up, and I know they're supposed to be doing more on Grand Central, because Hector just mentioned it to me this morning.
Which sign are you talking about?
The larger ones, like the ones you see in Jamaica, where it tells you directions of going to the
Oh, larger signs in general, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait for it.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Sharon?
This is a silly sign issue, but all around, the World Trade Center, they've got brown, red, and green forward and back signs, and you confuse them with the 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3 signs. And someone should tell them to make those signs a different shape so that you don't confuse them with the subway signs. Do you understand what I mean?
I do.
Yeah.
And I was just going all over the place because of it.
Are those DOT signs or the World Trade Center itself?
I don't know. I wrote to the Association for Downtown New York or whatever, and they said, blah, it's not there. But I don't know who's putting them up, but they should be a different shape because it's very confusing.
It's World Trade Center. is, because
I'll look at those.
Andrew, she's talking about, it's like, either way, which way, doesn't matter where we're coming out of, it is confusing, because I even look at them and like, sometimes they even hurt your eyes sometimes. And I know Edith had, years ago, complained about it, have not fixed it. So I'm thinking it's World Trade Center, but we know it's not Port Authority.
Who would that be, Silverstein Properties?
Brookfield, it's the kind of Brookfield.
Yeah, I think at least
It's
just at
just the
Brookfield.
stop and go signs.
Yeah.
It's
They have to be
logical, they
elevator
make
ones.
them red and
Not
green
the other
front, but it doesn't work.
Jason?
I would suggest, I have seen, tourists getting lost regarding, when they are in the subway or in the Long Island Railroad, they don't know in which side of the doors will actually open when they're getting to their destination. In other words, like in DC, in DC Metro, they will tell you in which side the doors will open, if it's left or right. And by the way, during this month, Virginia Rail Express will be free during this month. In other words, we should do the same to incentivize passengers to return to our system. Because in my opinion, doing the Lucky 13 or the discount that the commuter rail has isn't enough. We should do more.
Jason, you know that when the R211s are in service, they do light up on the side the doors are going to open on.
I know,
So we're getting
Andrew,
there.
but I think that is not going to even be enough.
It's a start.
It should be audio announcements like inside the car, because like when I was in DC when like in the 6000 series, like they will tell you which side of the car the door. No, that's in DC.
Yeah. Can I tell you one big difference, please?
Yeah.
Without prolonging this, a big difference is we are the only system with locals and expresses, and sometimes our trains are on weekend GOs and everything. They're on another track. If you had the pre-recorded announcements, it would be wrong in those occasions.
I don't know that, Andrew.
And if you're sitting on one end, your right is not my right. So if the doors are opening on the right, whose right?
It's the right of the direction. the train is going.
Exactly.
But in general, and local track.
Yeah, some people
We don't
don't.
have a regular.
Okay, do we have anything else for old business, new business? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I was gonna say, make a motion to
All right,
adjourn.
Chris makes a motion to adjourn, and Andrew looks like seconded.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I'll leave a couple for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi,
everybody.
Oh, like on the back.
I gotcha.
Everything. You just take them apart.